Have you ever felt like someone was trying to erase the very existence of the person you loved most and only you could see it happening? Have you ever been called paranoid, dramatic, delusional, while deep down you knew something was deeply, terribly wrong? Today's story isn't just about a crime. It's a battle to reclaim justice from the very hands of a man who walked into a grieving family, posing as a savior, but slowly swallowed their world whole. This is the journey of pulling a forgotten father from the cold depths of Lake Harrison, not with machines or divers, but with memory, relentless will, and the love of a daughter no one believed. Chapter 1: The Replacement. Named Brian. When my father went missing, I was only 15 years old. They said he disappeared during a fishing trip at Harrison Lake. The boat drifted ashore, but there was no trace. No body. No evidence. Just he was gone. My mother collapsed right on the spot when she heard the news. Right there in the kitchen, her legs buckled like someone had pulled the entire spine out of her body. I had to catch her before her head hit the edge of the counter. At that very moment, I thought, at least, we still have each other. That sentence became my mantra through endless, sleepless nights, when the search team gave up, when people went back to their normal lives, when neighbors stopped checking in. My mother and I had nothing left but each other, clinging to the hope of a miracle that never came. I started smoking, not because I thought it was cool, or because of friends. No, it was the only thing that kept me standing when faced with the futility of the searches, with the suffocating atmosphere of loss that filled our home. Then one Tuesday, my mother came home, different. Her hair was neatly combed. She wasn't wearing Dad's old hoodie anymore. Instead, she had on a dress I hadn't seen her wear since her wedding day. She smiled gently as if the skies were no longer gray and said, "This is Dr. Brian. He's helping me get through everything." I looked at the man standing next to her. Salt and pepper beard, polite but cold smile. An expensive watch, the kind of eyes that belonged to someone who thought they understood everything about pain, just because they had a diploma hanging on the wall. "Pleasure to meet you, Megan," he said, shaking my hand with both of his as if he were bestowing warmth upon me. "Your mother has told me so much about you. I'm here to help your family heal." I didn't believe him. At first, he only came over for dinner. Brought pizza or Chinese food, said Mom had forgotten to eat, needed someone to remind her. Then he started staying later. And then one night, I saw him sitting in Dad's chair, drinking coffee from the mug I had given Dad World's OK Fisherman. I froze in the living room doorway. "Oh, your mom said it was fine," he said, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Recreating familiar habits helps people heal." And my mother nodded. "Dr. Brian is helping us, Megan. You need to learn to accept it." 2 weeks later, his car was parked in the spot where my father's used to be. My father's office, the little room filled with fishing trophies, logbooks, and maps of the lake, had been transformed into Dr. Brian's study. Dad's belongings were boxed up. Mom said shrines to the dead only hindered the healing process. My mother started laughing again, but at his jokes, not at Dad's favorite movies. She started wearing makeup just to go grocery shopping, and she began cooking Mediterranean dishes, the ones Dad had always hated. One day I came home from school and saw Mom stuffing Dad's clothes into garbage bags. "Dr. Brian says keeping them only makes it harder to let go," she said, not daring to meet my eyes. I nodded, pretended to agree, pretended I hadn't secretly smelled one of Dad's old flannel shirts before tossing it into the bag, and my mother was busy. Always busy, constantly in advanced therapy sessions with Dr. Brian. She missed 3 parent-teacher conferences because he was helping her confront buried memories. I failed algebra, skipped lunch for weeks. No one asked why. At night, I would text Dad even though I knew full well his phone lay somewhere at the bottom of Harrison Lake. I still texted Dad. "Everything feels so strange. But I still love you. We still love you." It always showed sent, never received. And then one morning I saw Dr. Brian holding Dad's fishing rod, smiling as he said, "Today we're going fishing, just the 2 of us." It'll be great therapy. He drove Dad's truck, went to Dad's favorite fishing spot, wore sunglasses like Dad's, every gesture, every word, every move, as if he were trying to become him. I vomited the moment I stepped onto the dock, and he never brought up fishing therapy again. But deep inside, I knew he didn't just want to replace my father. He wanted to erase him completely from our memories. And that was when suspicion began to gnaw at me. Because if my father really was dead, why was Dr. Bryan so afraid of what he had left behind, Asernai? When family becomes a prison, I used to think losing my dad was the worst thing that could happen. But no, the worst thing was being treated like a problem by my own mother, just because I still remembered him. After that failed fishing trip, Dr. Bryan stopped trying to bond with me. Instead, he chose a different path, a more subtle, colder one. He started boxing me into an invisible corner, gradually making everyone believe I was losing my mind. It all began on Dad's birthday. I planned a simple memorial by the lake where his boat had been found. Just a few of his closest friends, a symbolic handful of ashes, some wildflowers. No alcohol, no fanfare, just a respectful goodbye. But Mom shot the idea down immediately. Dr. Bryan has arranged a moving forward ceremony at his therapy center. She said, her voice light as air. That's what our family really needs. I stared at her, unable to understand what she was even saying. Dad was never found. We didn't have any ashes. There hadn't been a proper funeral. I pleaded. I begged her to let me have one moment to say goodbye to my father on his birthday. Her face was ice. Your father is dead, Megan. This obsession with that lake, it's unhealthy. I don't remember what I screamed, but I remember very clearly the look in Dr. Bryan's eyes when he walked into the room, like he'd been waiting for it the whole time. Maybe he wanted to disappear, he said in that calm, familiar tone. Some men can't handle the pressure of being husbands or fathers. Mom didn't argue. She simply nodded, accepting his words as if they were undeniable facts. I stopped fighting. I had no strength left. I went upstairs to my little sister Katie's room and buried my face in her pillow. It still smelled like strawberry candy. I cried harder than I'd ever cried before. That night I dreamt my dad walked through the door, soaked in lake water, his eyes cloudy, staring at me silently. I woke up with my heart pounding like a war drum, and I knew I had to do something. I started digging. Not like some rebellious teenager, but like someone drowning, grabbing at anything that might float. One day, while Mom was out, I found the spare key to the study, the room that used to be Dad's office, now repurposed as Dr. Bryan's home therapy center. I didn't find anything until I opened the bottom drawer. A brown box labeled Shred. Inside were my father's old credit card statements. I flipped through them, my heart racing in my throat. There were transactions after the date he was declared missing, after the boat was found, after we scattered flowers on the water. I didn't wait for morning. I ran to Uncle Pete's house, Dad's best friend, at 2 a.m. He opened the door in shock, baseball bat in hand. The moment he realized it was me, his face turned pale. Your mom said you were at boarding school. Aunt Sharon, his wife, appeared behind him, and I saw fear on her face. They practically dragged me inside, slammed the door, and started whispering like someone was listening in. Uncle Pete raked his hand through his hair exactly like my dad used to do when stressed. There's something about that last night, he began. I promised your mom I wouldn't say anything, but you need to know. He opened his laptop, pulled up footage from the gas station where he worked night shifts. Timestamp, 10:47 p.m. the night Dad disappeared. Dad's truck appeared on the screen, fueling up, and there was someone in the passenger seat. Uncle Pete tried to zoom in. The face wasn't clear, just a shadow, a silhouette, but it was enough to knock the breath out of me. Aunt Sharon handed me a thick envelope credit card statement she'd quietly collected. One transaction stood out a charge at Moonlight Motel over 200 kilometers away, 3 days after Dad was presumed missing. My hands trembled as I touched the line item. No, it couldn't be. There was no way Dad just left. No way he was alive and never came back. The front door burst open, making all of us jump. There stood my mother, hair disheveled, wearing pajamas. Behind her was Dr. Brian Neat, perfect like some robot in a suit, dropped into a nightmare. Mom rushed into the kitchen, stared at me, stared at the documents. Then she started crying, yelling, shaking me, saying I was paranoid, that I was hurting the family. Dr. Brian just stood there, phone in hand. The screen's glow lit up his face. Through the window, I saw his breath forming on the glass, short, steady, ice cold. Something inside me cracked. I screamed, pointed at him, spilled out every suspicion I had, my voice hoarse from cigarettes and crying. Neighbors started gathering outside Uncle Pete's house. Everyone saw. Everyone heard. Mom hugged me tightly, but not to comfort me, to smother me with her excuses. That I was traumatized, that I hadn't processed Grandma's death last year, that I needed help. I looked around. Silence. Aunt Sharon said nothing. Uncle Pete clenched his wife's hand. Everyone had something to lose. Then the sound of police sirens pierced the night. Someone had called child services. 2 officers came in. Calm. Gentle. But their eyes scanned everything. I clutched the folder of statements. This was proof. This was the truth. But I also knew a teenage girl, wide-eyed and frantic in the middle of the night, is never believed right away. I let go of the papers, took a deep breath. I just had a nightmare, I said. I got scared and ran to my uncle's. Mom wept in relief. Dr. Brian exhaled quietly. The officers nodded and offered to drive me home. But as the car pulled away past Uncle Pete's window, I still saw him, Dr. Brian, standing there staring after me, phone in hand, his fingers scrolling without looking. He didn't have to scream, didn't have to threaten. He'd already won the first round, but I was no longer just a naive 15-year-old. I had seen the truth, and I wasn't going to stop. Chapter 3. Even men in white coats know how to stage a scene. The next morning, I sat silently at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, listening to my mom talk on the phone with my academic advisor. Her voice was gentle, apologetic, explaining why she hadn't been able to attend the last parent-teacher conference. Megan's still going through a difficult time. She just needs space. I nearly laughed. Space. What I needed was a mother clear-headed enough to realize she was sleeping with the enemy. The doorbell rang. It was Aunt Lisa, my mom's younger sister, fresh off a flight from Phoenix, dragging 2 oversized suitcases and wearing a confused expression. No warning, no explanation, just a sympathetic look when she saw me. I figured Dr. Brian had kicked off the next phase, bring in the relatives to manage the delusional daughter. I helped her carry her luggage to the guest room. She hugged me tight, smelling like airplane coffee and cheap vanilla perfume. As we walked down the hallway, I blurted out, I found Dad's credit card statements. There were charges after the day he went missing. Dr. Brian, standing right there, froze for a second. Just 1 second, but I saw it. Then he tilted his head, slightly softened his voice. Oh, that's great. We should go through your father's financial records together. Might help ease your mother's burden. 20 minutes later, he was hunched over the downstairs toilet, vomiting, talking about the grief of losing his first wife to cancer and overworking himself with grieving patients. My mom was holding him, consoling him, like he was the haunted one, not me. Aunt Lisa chimed in, too eyes-watery, calling him such an emotionally rich man. He was masterful. He could twist a moment of suspicion into an outpouring of sympathy. Emma, my 13-year-old cousin, skipped down from upstairs like she always did. When she saw Dr. Brian hunched over, she immediately rushed to his defense. He bought me an iPhone when Mom couldn't, and when those girls bullied me, he was the only one who listened. I swallowed my sense of betrayal. That 13-year-old didn't understand that affection could be used as bait. That's when I saw Dr. Brian's briefcase partially unzipped in the hallway. In the side pocket was my dad's leather journal, the one I gave him last Christmas. My heart thundered. I stepped forward, But as my hand reached for the doorknob to my mom's bedroom where the briefcase lay inside, I froze. If I went in, I'd be invading private space. If I took that evidence, it would make me the thief, and he'd use that against me, so I stepped back. But I remembered. I remembered every faded ink stain on that leather cover. I remembered Dad once wrote, "Someday, when you're old enough, I'll let you read what's in here." That day might never come unless I took it back myself. At school the next day, I tried to dig up more information on Dr. Bryan. I went to the library, opened a computer, and searched his name in the medical database. But Ms. Chen, the librarian, caught me. "Megan, what are you doing?" "Looking up a doctor's records." "My friend, she was abused, and I think he might be—" I didn't even know what I was saying. I made it up. And Ms. Chen misunderstood. That afternoon, Mom received an email from the school reporting suspicious surveillance behavior. Another strike against my already fragile mental record. Dr. Bryan didn't have to do a thing. He never needed to. All he had to do was let everyone around me start doubting. The rest unraveled on its own. Like a virus spreading sideways, he let each person come to believe that I was the issue. Friends drifted. Teachers kept their distance. Neighbors avoided my gaze when I walked by. Even at the PTA meeting, Sophia's mom. Sophia, my best friend since second grade, whispered to my mother, "Your daughter, she's unpredictable." Sophia couldn't look me in the eye when I came to pick up her little brother after school. Dr. Bryan didn't need to threaten anyone. He just had to build an ecosystem where I was the parasite. And so, while I was trying to find proof that my dad didn't just vanish, while I was clinging to every broken shard of memory I had of him, Dr. Bryan was turning me into living proof of instability. Every action I took, even the most reasonable ones, became just another puzzle piece in the portrait he was crafting. I no longer knew who was on my side. I only knew one thing: if I failed, it wouldn't just be my father who was buried. The truth would sink with him deep beneath the waters of Harrison Lake. Forever. Chapter 4, When the Truth Becomes Evidence Against You. I stopped sleeping entirely. Not just the usual kind of exhaustion. This was the kind where you lie in the dark, eyes wide open, heart pounding so hard it feels like the whole room is vibrating with it. I started taking notes. Every little thing. Every glance, every word, every clue. Just like Dad, just like he used to do when he was alive, something I only understood after reading a few loose pages from his journal. I no longer tried to warn my mom. I'd already tried. I'd yelled, cried, begged her to take a closer look, but nothing changed. Maybe she was too weak to face the truth. Or worse, maybe she knew the truth and chose to ignore it. And that made me angry. Angry to the point of fear. One night at dinner, out of nowhere, Dr. Bryan set down his fork and announced in a solemn tone, "If Megan agrees to issue a public apology and voluntarily enter intensive psychiatric care, I will take her to scatter her father's ashes at Harrison Lake." A symbolic gesture to help bring closure. The table went silent. Mom looked at me hopeful. Aunt Lisa bit her lip. Emma stared at her spoon. I was in disbelief. "No," I said. "I'm not going to pretend I'm crazy just so he can feel better about dumping the ashes of a man he might have murdered into the lake." I don't remember exactly how my voice sounded, but it was enough for Dr. Bryan to pull out his phone and start recording. I heard the soft beep, and I saw it in his eyes. He'd gotten what he wanted. "Excellent," he said. "Everyone heard that. She's preventing her family from healing. She's holding her mother hostage in a delusion." I fled the table, ran to my room like a maniac, but I knew one thing: he wasn't hiding anymore. Dr. Bryan was done playing the kind therapist. He was carrying out a psychological purge, and I was the final target. From there, things only got worse. Friends stopped talking to me. Family stopped texting. Facebook posts from the neighborhood started circulating about the mentally unstable girl causing disruptions at school. A photo of me smiling as I walked out of the records room, where I'd just uncovered Dr. Bryan's divorce documents, was shared online as proof I wasn't even grieving. I tried to record a confession from Dr. Bryan. I placed my phone on the kitchen counter, pretending to cook. Tried to provoke him, push him to his limits. but nothing. He smiled, stepped closer, looked me dead in the eyes, and gently said, "Megan, you need help. This isn't your fault. You're suffering from a severe emotional disorder." His hand swiped across his phone screen while his eyes never left mine. I was the one setting a trap, but I walked straight into his. Then came the knife incident. I had started carrying a small pocket knife, not to hurt anyone, just for protection. I knew he wouldn't stop. I was scared of being alone in the house. I was scared he'd one day help me fall down the stairs. But then, the school security found the knife in my backpack. I was called to the principal's office. Bulls. The security footage showed me being escorted down a crowded hallway like a teenage criminal. Only thing missing were the handcuffs for a full Hollywood effect. That imaged me with dark circles under my eyes, head down the knife, placed on a table in a Ziploc bag, circulated through the parent group chats. I heard she's had issues before someone wrote. Rumor is she once tried to take her own life. Another added. Funny thing is, they were right. I did go through a dark time. 2 years ago. After Grandma died. When Dad was still alive. And I was too caught up with friends' cigarettes and sneaking off to parties to notice he was trying to be a better man. I once texted my dad in a moment of anger, "I wish you'd just disappear already." Dr. Bryan had a copy of that text. Don't know how. But he used it to file a request for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. He claimed I was having conflicting thoughts and dangerous impulses. Things I had said in what I thought were safe therapy sessions, the times I told him I want him to pay, were now being used as proof that I was a danger to society. Every move I made, every effort to uncover the truth, was rebranded as a symptom of mental illness. I started keeping my own journal not to preserve memories, but in case I was taken away, I'd have something to leave behind. Then during a random cleaning session, I found an old tablet from when Emma was little, and it was still synced to the hallway baby cam. I scrolled through the old footage. The first clip almost made me drop the tablet. Dr. Bryan in the middle of the night entering my room while I was asleep. Not just once, many times. Opening drawers, rummaging through my stuff, picking up my journal and reading it. He repeated this at least 4 times in a single month. I brought the tablet to the family court liaison, someone assigned to help monitor Dr. Bryan's behavior. She watched the footage, then sighed. This can't be used. The camera wasn't in a public space. It's likely to be considered a privacy violation. Even solid evidence is useless if the system isn't on your side. I sat in the office tablet in my lap, wondering how many nights had he stood over me reading my thoughts, peeling away my defenses like layers off prey. I used to think I was alone, because my dad was gone. But now I understand. I'm alone because he made the world believe I'm crazy. And when you're the out-of-control daughter in the eyes of the community, you don't have to be wrong. They just have to believe you're wrong for it to become a life sentence inside your own family. Chapter 5, The Dead Have Their Ways of Speaking. I used to think I'd collapse before I could chip away even one brick from the wall Dr. Bryan had built around me. But it turns out the one who handed me the first crowbar was my dad. It all started with a moment of pure desperation. I was sitting in the public library, glued to a computer like an information addict, desperately searching for something, anything, that could turn the tide. And then I remembered Dad's old email. Last year, he had asked me to help him log in and set up online banking. The browser on my laptop still had the password saved. It was strange, almost poetic, that his forgetfulness would become my salvation. I logged in. The inbox was empty. But in the drafts folder, there was something chilling. Over 30 unsent emails. All were notes. Drafts to lawyers, to close friends, even to my mother. There was a saved search, one-party consent recording law. He had been researching how to legally record conversations without the other person knowing. My father had known something, and he had been preparing, just like I was. I dug deeper. Among the drafts, One line stopped my breath. If something happens to me, don't let Brian cover it up. I don't trust him, and I'm gathering proof. My hands were trembling as I saved everything. But I also knew if he found out I had accessed my dad's account, I might lose access for good. So I backed up the entire archive, emailed copies to myself, and stored them on a USB drive hidden in the secret double lining of my backpack, a place he would never think to look. That afternoon when I got home, I found my mom and Dr. Brian getting ready for a trip to Sedona, a so-called healing getaway. I saw the rolling luggage, a printed resort receipt, and my father's credit card. I nearly laughed. He was using the money of a dead man to take my mother on a vacation, to recover from that very same man's death. I almost vomited on the carpet. I wanted to confront him on the spot, but then I saw Emma standing there, and I knew I couldn't let her see me explode. A few days later, I returned to some of Dad's old case files. Through Marcus, his AA buddy, I learned that Dad had paid for Marcus's motel stay on the very day I'd once believed was the day he disappeared. That shattered everything I thought I knew. Dad didn't walk out. Dad didn't fall into the lake. He had still been there helping someone else right to the very end. His kindness in the shadows still burned like a torch in the darkness Dr. Brian had tried to use to bury the truth. I found Marcus. At first he avoided me, but after I played a voice recording from Dad's email, a clip of him talking about the man pretending to help our family, Marcus nodded. He said, "If anything happened, I had to help you." Marcus whispered, his eyes wet. I didn't cry. I just nodded back. The next day, while organizing old books in the garage, I found a tackle box, Dad's old fishing gear, tucked away beneath a pile of tools. Inside was a small envelope tightly wrapped with fishing lines sealed shut and handwritten with, "Only Megan knows the code." I opened it. Inside, a key to a safe deposit box. I could barely breathe. I knew Dad always used the date of our first fishing trip together as his pin. And I knew exactly what that date was, January 13th. The next morning, I went to the bank. My heart felt like it might burst through my ribs as the lock clicked open. Inside was everything. Photos of Dr. Brian's car parked outside our house. At times he claimed he was at medical conferences, copies of fraudulent insurance transactions, a recorded conversation with my mom in which she said, I couldn't face the truth if it meant it was Brian. His falsified schedules contrasted with GPS location records, proving otherwise. It was like my father had been building a courtroom exhibit. He had been ready to bring the truth into the light, but he had been stopped. Now, it was my turn to finish what he started. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt ready. I wouldn't scream in Dr. Brian's face. I wouldn't cry like a girl no one believed. I would stay silent, turn each page piece by piece, and let the truth kill him slowly, legally, and mercilessly. Just like Dad once taught me to fish, don't yank the rod too soon. Let the bait sink. And when the fish bites, reel it in at the perfect moment. Chapter 6, Bait, Traps, and the Net of Justice. I knew Dr. Brian wouldn't fall just because of a few papers. Men like him, slick and calculating, don't break under confrontation. They collapse under the weight of the very things they think they're above: protocols, regulations, and the final signature on a professional oath. And luckily, I had the one thing he overlooked: his own medical license renewal form. In it, Dr. Brian swore under penalty of perjury that he had never engaged in a personal relationship with any current or recent patient, but I had a recording of my mom confirming she began treatment with him before they started dating. On paper, she was a patient. In bed, she was his lover. And to me, she was just a pawn, so thoroughly manipulated she lost her own daughter in the process. I submitted everything to the state medical board. Dad's handwritten letters, GPS-stamped photos, metadata recordings from the safe deposit box. No accusations, no personal outbursts, just the truth, neatly organized into 3 tabbed binders labeled and time-stamped, just like my dad would have done. When Dr. Brian walked into the hearing room, his suit was still immaculate, but there was sweat beating at his temple. For the first time, he wasn't in control of the stage. When the board questioned his sworn declaration, he stammered. When they compared his schedule to the GPS logs, he bit his lip. When they played the audio of my mom admitting she was once his patient, alongside his fake insurance statements, he went silent. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to convince anyone. I just let him collapse under the weight of his own lies. The decision came back in under 20 minutes. Immediate suspension of medical license. Criminal investigation opened. He left the room like a shadow that had lost its body. And this time, my mother had seen everything. A few days later, I got a call from Detective Reyes, a state investigator. Her voice was calm but firm. I've reviewed everything. If what you've submitted holds up, this case is much bigger than we thought. 1 week later, Dr. Bryan was arrested. No sirens, no cuffs in public, just 2 officers walking into the therapy center, once a safe space for hundreds of patients, and quietly escorting him out, like he was just another man suffering from a severe depressive episode. I stood at the window watching. He didn't look back. But if he had, I would have looked him dead in the eyes without blinking. In his home, the police found my dad's phone, the one he was carrying the night he disappeared once, believed to be lost at the bottom of the lake. The last text draft was still on the screen. Never sent. Brian knows about the evidence. Location history showed the phone was at Harrison Lake the night Dad vanished. Then it pinged again at Dr. Bryan's home, and it stayed there ever since. That night, my mom collapsed in the kitchen, the same spot where she once crumpled when she thought Dad had died. This time I caught her. She didn't say a word, just held onto me, shaking like a child. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. But I didn't pull away either. I let her cry. The hearings that followed were a storm. Witnesses, evidence, charges coming down like thunder. Dr. Bryan's ex-wife flew in from Seattle to testify. The bruises I once saw on her wrists at the Whole Foods tea counter were now courtroom exhibits. Even Emma testified in a separate room under supervision. She recounted the strange questions Dr. Bryan used to ask her, the games he called helping mommy feel better by reporting Megan's behavior. When she said, "I thought I was helping keep our family happy," I didn't know whether to cry or punch a wall. In the end, Dr. Bryan took a plea deal, 15 years in prison for manslaughter, insurance fraud, and gross professional misconduct. No parole for the first 5 years. License permanently revoked. I didn't feel satisfied. No sentence would ever be enough for killing my father and destroying my life. But it was justice. I stood at the sentencing hearing, reading my victim impact statement. In my jacket pocket was Dad's final handwritten letter found in the tackle box at the bottom of the lake. I spoke about a father who was trying to change, who wanted to leave a toxic marriage but still tried to protect the woman he once loved. I spoke about the psychological devastation of a man pretending to be a healer. And I said, my father didn't die in that lake. My father died in the shadows of manipulation of silence of a man who thought he was God. But now, he's been heard, and he's not silent anymore. The entire courtroom fell still. Dr. Bryan turned to look at me once as they led him away. My mom bowed her head. But me, I met his eyes. Just as I promised. No shaking, no tears. Just one undeniable truth. He may have killed my father, but he didn't kill me. Chapter 7, the pieces that remain after the trial. Life didn't magically get better like in the movies. There was no triumphant music, no soft beam of light shining down from the heavens, just an eerie silence like the kind that lingers after a violent storm when you're still too afraid to step out of the shelter, not sure if the final wave has passed. Dr. Bryan had been sentenced to 15 years in prison, lost his medical license, was shunned by society. But his shadow still loomed. In the house that used to be my home, his scent lingered in the air. His self-help book still sat on the shelf. And the sofa where he once sat telling fake soothing stories in that cologne-slicked power suit still creaked under someone's weight. My mom didn't move out, but she did scrub him out of her life, literally. The Mediterranean spice jars he loved thrown straight into the trash. The overpriced abstract painting he bragged about buying at a Berlin art show, taken down. In its place, a framed photo of our family, me, dad, and mom, grinning ear to ear on a camping trip when I was 7. And then there was the flannel shirt, dad's flannel, the one he always wore on late night fishing trips, the one mom once tossed in a garbage bag on Dr. Bryan's orders. I had hidden it, bottom drawer behind a shoebox and the algebra study guide I never used. Mom found it while cleaning. I braced myself expecting anger, but she held it to her chest, sat down at the kitchen table, and cried like someone who had just allowed herself to finally feel pain. We decided to keep the shirt, not as a sad reminder, but as a symbol Dad was here. And he always would be. We had it framed and hung in the hallway where Dad used to hang his work jacket. Every time I walk by, I press my hand gently to the glass, like touching a memory, a ritual. Emma went back to school. Mom got her into therapy, this time with a real doctor. Not a predator in a white coat pretending to be a savior. It took Emma a long time to understand that Uncle Brian wasn't a good man, that gifts and attention can be tools, that his little games were never about love. One afternoon, I caught her deleting his number from her phone. She didn't cry. She just pressed her lips together hard, and I knew that was her way of reclaiming power over her own memories. Mom started working part-time for a nonprofit that helps women recover from psychological abuse. I'm not sure if it was guilt redemption or just her way of doing something good again, but I didn't stop her. As for me, I went back to school, head high, not because I didn't fear the whispers, but because I had survived. No one could slap a crazy label on me again, not after everything I'd exposed. Some people apologized. Ms. Chen sent me a handwritten letter saying she regretted not standing up for me sooner. Ms. Rodriguez was reinstated back to teaching English, the same class where she once helped me print hundreds of pages of evidence. We nodded to each other in the hallway. No words needed. Others like Sophia's family. They never said a thing. They didn't need to. We both knew we'd taken separate paths. Forever. One day, Mom gently held my hand and said, I knew. Back then, I knew something was wrong, but I was scared. I'd already lost your dad. I didn't think I could survive losing anything else. So I chose to believe the person who sounded easier to believe. I didn't reply. I didn't need to forgive her right away. But I squeezed her hand, the same way I used to when I was little, and scared of getting a shot. Some wounds don't heal with apologies, but if you're patient and brave enough, they do stop bleeding. On the first anniversary of Dad's death, we finally held the memorial at Harrison Lake. The same one I had begged Mom to have a year ago. No therapists, no canapes, no dumb rituals, just a small group. Me, Mom, Emma, Aunt Lisa, Uncle Pete, a few of Dad's old friends. We told stories, laughed, cried, scattered wildflower seeds around the lake right where the boat had been found. Just an ordinary afternoon, but an extraordinary closure. When we finally scattered Dad's ashes, real ashes this time confirmed by DNA, Mom whispered, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But our little girl wasn't. I stood beside her holding Emma's hand, listening to the water, lapping gently at the shore. And for the first time in a year, I wasn't afraid anymore. Not afraid of traps. Not afraid of being called delusional. Not afraid of losing anyone else. I had walked through hell and come back. And more importantly, I didn't come back alone. Chapter 8, The Legacy of a Survivor. I used to think I was just a side character in my dad's life. A rebellious daughter, impatient and dramatic. The kind of girl who once wished he'd just disappear already after he embarrassed me at a school party. But now I understand I wasn't a side character. I was the heir not to his possessions, but to his spirit. After everything, I was no longer a girl running through chaos, desperate to be heard. I was the one who exposed a manipulator, the one who dragged light into a place once consumed by lies and fear. I was living proof that some truths, no matter how deeply buried, will always find their way to the surface. The months after the trial were when I learned how to breathe again. Emma started journaling, not because anyone told her to, because she wanted to remember the right things she said once so they don't get confused with the wrong ones. One night she asked me, "Do you think if you hadn't done anything, Uncle Brian would have stayed forever?" I looked at her and answered honestly, maybe. But maybe you would have been the one to stand up someday. I just happened to speak first. Mom cut her hair short. For the first time in years, she let go of the style Dr. Brian always liked. She said, "This is my hair, not a memory someone else chose." It might sound small, but I knew this was the quietest, fiercest rebellion she had ever made. I went back to school, not for the grades, but for the promise I owed Dad. When he was alive, he always said he wanted me to go to college to study something that made me argue and think hard. I chose psychology and law. I don't want to save the world. I just want to make sure no one ends up where I did with no one willing to believe them. Every time I walk into the library and sit at that old computer station, I remember the nights I spent researching one-party consent laws, the mornings printing dozens of pages from Dad's email, the afternoons standing at the door of the Free Legal Center asking how to file a petition. And now I know those small steps. They saved my life. I still keep the 3 evidence binders, clean, indexed, labeled in my father's handwriting. Someone once suggested I should burn them to free myself, but I didn't. I keep them. They're my personal archive, the library of a survivor. I still visit Harrison Lake, not to cry, but to remember. There's a familiar spot by the rocks where Dad once tied a fishing line for me for the first time. I sit there sometimes. I bring a can of non-alcoholic beer and pop it open, set it down beside me just like he used to. Not to drink, but to save it for him. I know that one day all of this might fade, that people will forget the trial, that the wounds will scar over, that someone new might come into my mom's life, into Emma's, maybe even into mine. But I swear no one will ever look me in the eye again and say I imagined it. I'm no longer the Megan from a year ago. I don't need validation. Dad gave me the proof, and I honored it by listening, by believing, and by fighting. In the end, what made me strong wasn't rage, it was love. The love of a father for his daughter so powerful, it protected me even after he was gone. If someone were to ask me now, after everything, do I still believe in people, I would say yes. Because I met good people in the darkness, Ms. Rodriguez, Marcus, Aunt Lisa, Detective Reyes. They weren't perfect, they weren't heroes, but they chose truth when truth was hardest to stand beside. And more importantly, I've learned how to be one of them. Chapter 9. Truth, Consequences, and What No One Talks About. I thought that after the sentencing, after my father's second funeral, this time a real one, everything would be over, that the justice system had done its job, that the monster had been locked away, that somehow my family had survived. But the truth endings don't look like fairy tales, because truth doesn't save everyone. 1 month after Dr. Brian went to prison, I got a letter from his attorney's office. A civil lawsuit, defamation, data breach, and damage to personal reputation prior to a formal conviction. I remember letting out a dry laugh when I read the line irreparable emotional and financial damage. I thought, yeah, I guess his feelings were hurt when he couldn't ride on other people's backs anymore. My attorney, a silver-haired woman named Greta, just sighed. They know they'll lose, but they don't have to win. They just have to exhaust you. It's a tactic called paper terrorism, civil harassment, via frivolous lawsuits designed to drain your time, money, and sanity. Dr. Brian didn't want to win. He wanted to drag me back into the mud with him. Luckily, I wasn't that isolated 15-year-old anymore. Greta and her law students turned our living room into a war room. Boxes of files, timeline charts, witness affidavits, legal motions, audio transcripts. This time I wasn't fighting alone, but that was only the legal side. The emotional side was harder. One afternoon, Emma came home in tears. A classmate had whispered, "That's the girl whose stepdad's a murderer." She's only 13. She doesn't yet know how to separate truth from the ugly things adults say in grocery store aisles. I held her, stroked her hair, and whispered over and over, "You didn't do anything wrong. You were just a kid who got used by adults." I don't know if she believed me, but I knew I had to be the example. I started speaking at youth mental health panels. I told my story not to relive it, but to warn people bad people don't always wear black and laugh like villains. Sometimes they wear ironed dress shirts, hand you a self-help book, and take your entire family away. I'm not a hero. I don't want to be the poster girl for trauma, but I know how it feels to be dismissed, branded as unstable, called the family problem just for speaking up. Victims shouldn't be seen as inconvenient. One time, a girl named Eliza, 17, stood up after a talk and whispered, "Thank you. I think I'm in a story like yours, but I'm not sure yet." I didn't tell her what to do. I just handed her Greta's business card and said, "Truth doesn't have to be rushed. Just don't let it die in silence." And my mom, she still goes to therapy. She still gets panic attacks out of nowhere, still wakes up some nights calling my dad's name, but this time she doesn't run. She stays. She takes responsibility. And that's something I never thought I'd see. Each month, she sends a letter to the prison. Not to curse Dr. Bryan, but to tell him she's doing better, that Emma is doing well in school, that I'm still strong. I once asked her why write to him. She said, "Because if he ever truly believed he mattered to me, he needs to know. I'm fine without him." A punishment colder than steel and deeply feminine. I quietly admired her for it. I write letters too, but not to him. I write to Dad, one every week, just like I did as a kid when I went to summer camp. "Hi, Dad. Today I helped Emma prep her class speech. I told her the Harrison Lake story, and she said, 'I think he heard us.' We won, Dad. Not perfectly. There are still cracks, but we won. I don't know if he can read them, but I'm sure he sees them, because every time I sit at that lake, I feel something that's never gone away. Not the water, not the wind, but a hand, unseen, unwavering, resting on my shoulder as if to say, 'You did good, kid. Now go on and live.'" Chapter 10. Dawn After Hell. People often ask, after justice is served, after all the loss, pain battles, and emotional scars, is there still anything left to live for? The answer is yes, but it's not the same as before. A year after the day my father disappeared, I was no longer the Megan who lived in a white fenced house with grilled salmon dinners Dad used to make. I was no longer the girl who sat on the dock at Lake Harrison, texting a phone that had long since settled at the bottom of the lake. I was the Megan after the storm, of ashes, of paperwork, of sleepless nights, and of rebirth. My family isn't perfect, but we're still here. Emma made the school debate team. She stood before the teacher panel and told a story about a man who pretended to be a hero and a little girl who dared to say no. I sat in the audience, eyes unblinking. She ended her speech with, "Not everyone who makes you afraid is right, and not everyone who grieves is wrong. Sometimes the only one who hears the cry for help is you." She won second place. I won a full-on ugly cry after the ceremony. Mom started writing a book, not about the case, but about the journey of a woman overcoming emotional dependency. A book, she says, for those who believe they can't live without someone beside them. She printed a special edition just for me, with the cover inscription, "To my daughter, the one who taught me that truth may not always be comfortable, but it's the only thing that keeps us alive." I earned a full scholarship in psychology, not because of perfect grades, but because of my application essay, a quiet, personal account of betrayal and how a survivor slowly put herself back together. Greta, my lawyer, invited me to intern with her for the summer. She said, "Megan, you don't have to be a lawyer, but if you do, there are a few people in this system who won't sleep well. I think maybe I will. Maybe one day another girl like me will need someone to stand beside her, not as a fellow victim, but as her defender. Lake Harrison doesn't choke me up anymore. Emma and I still go once a month. We plant wild flowers, read letters to Dad, laugh, cry, sit in silence. We kept our promise to create something beautiful out of tragedy. And the house, once a battleground, is a home again. Not because we painted the walls or changed the furniture, but because no one inside it controls anyone else through fear anymore. Dr. Brian doesn't send letters anymore. Even if he did, I wouldn't read them. I don't need more explanations. He already lost the one thing he wanted most control of the narrative. This story is mine, my father's, my mother's, Emma's. The story of those who believed me and of those who didn't. Because in the end, truth doesn't need agreement to exist. I no longer see justice as a flaming sword, but as a compass, always pointing to what's right, even when the path is crooked, even when the one holding it loses their way over and over again. On my last night in town before leaving for college, I sat alone by the lake. The moon shimmered like 1,000 shards of broken glass reassembled into a mirror. I pulled from my jacket pocket a letter, the first one I ever wrote to Dad, but never sent. The one I wrote the night he went missing. Dad, if you're out there somewhere, please come back. I'm sorry for the things I said. I just didn't think you understood me. But I never wanted you to actually disappear. I didn't need to keep that letter anymore. I folded it and let it drift onto the surface of the water. It floated away, weightless, as if saying, "It's enough now, Megan." I smiled. For the first time, remembering my father didn't hurt. It only made me feel grateful that he taught me to love truth, even when it hurt. Grateful that he trusted I'd one day be strong enough to finish what he started, and grateful that without ever saying it, he passed the compass to me before he left. Sometimes justice doesn't come through a gun or handcuffs or a courtroom verdict. It comes from a plastic box at the bottom of a lake, from a journal entry, from a child who refused to stay silent. If you've ever lived through something the world told you to stay quiet about, but your heart just couldn't, remember this: truth doesn't need approval to exist. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to your channel name for more stories that make you question what it really means to trust. And if you have a true story to share, send it to us, because who knows, it might just save someone, the way Megan once saved herself. See you in the next video.